Okay, go easy on me. This is my first video, but I'm doing a walkthrough of the DGL 5500 from D-Link. It's a gaming router. It actually works pretty cool. Anyway, here we go. Log in through the default IP address and see how we go. As you can see, I've got a few devices on my network that are actually active. You'll get this by default as you load up your network, and it'll give you sort of a brief overview of who's using what data. You can get a sort of more finite list by clicking on the router icon in the middle, or if you want to see what each device is doing, you can click them individually. So we'll just do a quick one here, and we'll see that on the computer I'm currently on, you got it's detected that we're running Steam, and I've also got Diablo 3 running in the background. You can see its network bandwidth, and obviously green means optimal. Also, I've got YouTube traffic running in the background, which is also running at optimal speeds. Next, to optimize this side of it, I'd recommend prioritizing your computers that actually play games, whether it be Xbox, PlayStation 4, etc. For instance, my computer's at the top, so I get first pick of the bandwidth, and so on and so on. But it also dynamically distributes bandwidth between everybody by default, but I just get higher priority because I'm first on the list. So if you have an Xbox and want the best priority, bump you up the list, and so on and so forth. Okay, next I'll just step you through the wireless settings that I have. First off, always use WPA or WPA2 encryption. For optimal performance, I use AES encryption. Also note that there's a setting here of HT20/40 coexistence. This is so that the router on the 2.4 gigahertz band communicates and actually sort of plays nice with other 2.4 gigahertz devices that are actually in your area. This will actually slow your network performance down because it sort of dynamically adjusts the actual 20/40 megahertz frequencies so that basically you don't interfere with other people around you. But if you want more bandwidth, just disable this feature. But at the moment, leaving it on enabled seems to work for me without too much of a problem. So anyway, going down through is just your normal setup. I recommend if you only have N devices, just select it N only. You'll get a little bit more speed out of it. Leave channels to auto because there's only about 3 non-overlapping channels anyway. It picks from, I think it's channel 1, 6 and 11. And they actually seem to work the best. If you do have a congestion of wireless networks in your area, I'd recommend downloading an app on your smartphone so you can scan for networks and detect and see what channels they're operating on, and actually pick a more open channel. So if you've got severe congestion, like maybe 12 more networks that you're detecting, you might want to see which channel's being least used. So for instance, if the app says, oh, maybe channel 3 isn't being used much, but like channel 1 is fully used, channel 6 is fully used, and channel 11 is fully used, try to pick ones in between that aren't as well used. That'll get you a little bit more speed. Not a lot, but it'll actually help. But if you just got like maybe 2 or 3 networks around you, then just leave it auto and it'll just do fine. 5 gigahertz. If you want better range out of your 5 gigahertz, I'd recommend setting to channels 149 and above. They tend to give greater power output, but they actually are susceptible to interference more than the lower channels. So channels 36 to 40 and I think 44 as well, they're not as susceptible to, for instance, microwave interference, like from your microwave cooker. But that's just only in my personal experience. There's probably plenty of documents on YouTube that can show you the spectrums and how that interferes. But if you've got not a lot of microwaves around you, or you're just in a residential area, if you want to get just that little bit more range and speed out of it, select the higher channels manually. I also recommend doing a channel scan as well, just to make sure that there's no other overlapping channels, because that will actually reduce your performance. And I just leave everything auto. It's just easier when it comes to the actual channel width. And obviously always use WPA or WPA2 encryption, and for best performance AES encryption. If you want better encryption, you can use the actual combination of the two, or the TKIP, which actually gives you a little bit better, but it's a lot slower. Other than that, I just leave everything default. Going on to network settings, I'd recommend leaving everything as default in network settings. You can actually interfere with a few things, but as a standard, I've got mine set up so that I've actually got IPs that are actually reserved for different devices, so that I don't have to worry about them picking up different devices. Other than that, the next is Stream Boost, the actual configuration for Stream Boost. Now, if you let it on the setup config, if you just go auto and you let it automatically download new, well, obviously updates, which I highly recommend. It actually will, like as games are released, improve the actual gaming performance, which it actually has with a couple of games. I think World of Tanks was one, where I was getting a lot of the ping was good, but there's a lot of what do you call it, packet loss in the actual packets of data, and updating it seemed to fix the problem. Anyway, it also tests your bandwidth, whichever, like whatever, it actually uses speedtest.net's array of servers, where and locates you the nearest one in wherever you are in the world, and gives you your up and down speeds, and that, according to this, that corresponds with obviously the bandwidth control. Next, we'll go to some advanced stuff. Now, obviously, you just got your normal servers, port forwarding, firewall settings, DMZs and schedules, so there's nothing really major that you have to worry about. You can have a bit of a play with it, but just be careful. Any settings you change can actually affect things. A couple of things I have actually modded by default is the firewall settings, the SPI and anti-spoof checking. I've enabled those, just that I get a bit of hacking involved in my area, and they seem to help. Anyway, I'll just have a look at statistics. This gives you a brief overview of what you're using and how you use your device over certain days, weeks, months, and how much data you've actually used. It's actually quite handy actually. As you can see, I use a lot of YouTube. And you go activity tracker. Okie dokie, so this one's not fully compatible with my browser, but anyway, you can see that it says that everything's been optimal. If you do have a slower internet connection than mine, you'll find that it'll actually, obviously you can see up here, optimal is like you get the optimal bandwidth for whatever application you're using, good and best effort. Now that means that, for instance, if you've got a whole heap of people using your router at the same time, it'll do its best to give you a optimal or good and distribution of the bandwidth and best effort accordingly. This is just, you'll see, this is just so that everybody doesn't get one whole chunk of the bandwidth and you don't get all clogged up. Anyway, going on to maintenance. Now, this is just generic stuff, as you can see, just time, date and system stuff. You can enable graphical authentication, but for where I am, I don't really need to worry about it. And system, as you can see, I'm running a 1.12 beta firmware. I do not recommend by default that you actually run this. It's for testing purposes only, so your results may differ. But the menus are pretty much identical. And I do recommend that after you've actually configured and set up your router, you actually save the configuration, which saves a configuration file to your hard drive on your local computer. This allows you to, for instance, reset the device and just load all your settings instantly. And it's a time saver if you need to update your firmware, for instance, which requires a full factory reset. And I think that's about it, except for status, which we gives all our IP addresses and whether we're connected and all, just a general overview and logs. That about wraps it up. And one thing I have noticed is there is no logout button for this router. The whole idea is you just close the tab when you're done. Other than that, you just give you a brief walkthrough of the bandwidth again. As you can see, I'm still running D3, and you can see the bandwidth actually on there, and it looks like my YouTube videos are all cached and caught up. Anyway, well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll bring you more videos in the future if this one's okay.